Simon, you've had some interesting results of some investigations that you've done recently. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes. So I decided to do an entire episode on my heart scan results, which not everyone does, making those results public. So I'm proud that I was able to do that, and I think it's led to some pretty impactful conversations already. So my backstory is that when I was 15 years old, I was with my dad and experienced him having a heart attack. And that whole long story there, but I'll make it quick. He survived and was taken to the nearest hospital by helicopter, actually, because we were quite a way away. And in the aftermath of that, I was kind of told by the cardiologist, this is a disease that runs in families, so you're going to want to keep an eye on this. And some years later, about a decade, I was at university.
How old was your dad, sorry?
My dad was 41.
Okay, so very, very young.
Yeah. And out of nowhere, he had, like you, you had a different experience, but also heart-related. He wasn't on any medications and had no diagnoses.
Gotcha.
You know, was from the outside a typical Australian dad, otherwise healthy. So certainly not something you expect.
No.
And a decade or so later, I did my undergraduate degree in physiotherapy and then a master's in nutrition science. And I was getting really interested in understanding how can we eat to live better for longer, particularly for me personally. How can I eat to lower my risk of cardiovascular disease so I don't have the same experience that my dad had? And, over time, I learned that we have a lot more control and say in terms of how our health plays out than I had thought at the time.
Yeah.
I had thought it was largely genetically determined, which is pretty disempowering.
Yeah.
As a 15-year-old.
Absolutely, yeah.
And so the evolution of that was picking up more and more information, feeling more empowered, and then wanting to share that information publicly with many other people who are experiencing similar things in their families. And wanting to be really proactive with their health and prevent disease before it kind of manifests as symptomatic. And so part of this process for me has been about making lifestyle changes, and it's also about understanding what are the risk factors and things that we can monitor over time to ensure that we're doing our very best at reducing our risk of, in my case, primarily cardiovascular disease. And so I'm 39 now. And my dad was 41 when he had his event. So one of the things that I've been interested in is looking kind of underneath the hood, actually inside the arteries and the key arteries that are providing blood and oxygen to the heart, and understanding how healthy they are, if I have soft plaque or hard plaque. And the way of doing this is to use scans like CT angiogram and a coronary artery calcium scan, both of which I did. And
just before we go into that investigation, actually, I just want to rewind very slightly to how you landed on the dietary and lifestyle approaches to prevent cardiovascular disease, and what you actually landed on in terms of your diet.
Yeah, so this was actually the motivation to go back and do a master's in nutrition science, was that I was working as a physiotherapist, and I had a mix of experience working with elite professional athletes, footballers in Australia, with AFL team Richmond and their feeder team Coburg, which you of course know, given that you spent some time.
I spent a bit of time in
Oz. And then I mixed that with some private practice work in various kind of suburbs, and I realized that I myself was very confused about nutrition, and I was digesting the information that most people were at the time through the mainstream media, a little bit of social media, what people would say at dinner. And I realized that there are so many different conflicting ideas, and there's a lot of conviction behind these ideas. And how can it be that you can have the same conviction for what appear to be very conflicting, contradictory ideas? Right? There has to be some degree of certainty or truth within the literature that can show us what is a more evidence-based direction, or what is the evidence-based direction to go down. And I realized I didn't have the skills to be able to read the literature to actually determine that, even though I had an undergraduate science degree. And so went back and learned about all of the various types of nutrition science and what different studies tell us and what they don't tell us, and how they kind of fit together to inform best practice guidelines. And to me, and there is no kind of truth with a capital T as such. Yeah. Science is about reducing uncertainty. Yeah. There's always open questions.
Yeah.
But what did become clear to me is that there is a theme, a way of eating that consistently is associated with lower risk of cardiovascular disease, cardiometabolic diseases in general, and also a way of eating that shifts important risk factors that are established in a favorable direction. So we understand not only that people who are eating in a certain way are having less events, whether it's developing type 2 diabetes or having a heart attack, stroke, or dementia, but we understand some of the mechanisms and the way in which those dietary choices are affecting physiology. And while it's not one specific diet, there is a theme, and those diets tend to be diets that are largely unprocessed. From a fat perspective, there's a bias towards unsaturated fats. From a protein perspective, a bias towards plant protein, and they're high in fiber, making them really healthy from a gut microbiome perspective. And you can kind of cut that up in a number of ways.
Yeah.
It could be Mediterranean, it could be pescatarian, it could be plant-based, it could be low carb, it could be high carb. And then, learning that, I realized, well, my current diet's a long way off from that. So through my 20s and into my mid-20s, again, I'm in this environment of kind of fitness and football. It was very much about maximizing animal protein. And so with that, I was getting a lot of animal fats. I didn't have a very processed diet, which was a pretty good starting point. But my LDL cholesterol was sitting at almost 130 milligrams per deciliter, which we just converted.
Yeah, we did, which is, you just bring that conversion up. It's above 2.6 millimoles per liter for LDL-C, so it's high. Definitely high. Yeah. But in your 20s, you probably weren't even thinking about, a regular 20-year-old who didn't have the experience that you had with your father probably wouldn't even be checking their cholesterol, let alone worrying about a high one.
Yeah, and I understand why, because this disease kind of rarely kind of rears its head in your 20s. Yeah. It's bubbling away under the surface. And we know that it can begin as early as in the womb, depending on the mother's cholesterol. Certainly in infancy or in teenage years, it can begin with people who have sky-high cholesterol, a genetic type of cholesterol called hypercholesterolemia. But it's not causing an issue for most people until fifth decade or on, where there's enough time for enough plaque to build up and it's affecting blood flow.
Yeah.
But I had extra motivation because my dad had a heart attack very early. And so I was in a slightly different position to most 20-year-olds. I think often is the case in life, people are not compelled to make a change unless they themselves experience a health event. Yeah. Or someone close to them. Yeah. And up until that point, honestly, I just thought health was a given. I hadn't had a grandparent pass away, and my parents were otherwise healthy. So I hadn't really seen health kind of almost disappear in a flash like that. And so I decided to look at all of that science and then see whether I could make some of these changes. And I was pretty worried about whether I'd be able to do it. I was eating tons of steak.
Really?
Like I was the guy who every single time I'd organize dinner with my friends, it was the steakhouse.
Oh, it was a steakhouse. Yes. Yeah.
And I would have the biggest steak I could order with butter all over it. And honestly, like I loved steak and I don't eat it today, but I can still say it tastes amazing.
Yeah. That's very brave of you to say that, as a plant-based.
It does. There's no denying that.
Sure,
so I understand why it's on people's plates. and features largely in a lot of people's diets for sure. And I had all the concerns around like, well, where am I going to get my protein, and am I going to like these other foods that I really have never eaten? And so it was a real process, and I took my time and made slow changes and didn't get there overnight making those changes. But yeah, fast track to now, that was over a decade ago. Yeah. And so I've been eating this way for a long time, and I was interested in understanding what the current kind of state of health of my arteries looks like. And that would then help inform me as to whether I would just continue with my lifestyle as it is, or whether I need to also consider medicine as another kind of preventative